with some of our fellow guests today. So our guest today is Nigel Harris, who, when I checked his LinkedIn profile just to properly introduce Nigel today, all it says is CEO, Mater Foundation, 23 years. So he's title explaining what he's done in his previous life. He's had 23 years at the Mater Foundation, which is an exceptional performance in any organisation, let alone a big not-for-profit. And I think that's why when I thought of Nigel for today's event, we had such a great response from people both within the NFT space and from our private advisor network. People certainly know of Mater. It is one of our best known charities. So most of our kids and family members were probably born there around Brisbane, and Nigel's been so well connected to that space. And I know in the past he's been the federal president of the Australian Philanthropy Fundraising Society, which is a professional group that people like Nigel commits to. So Nigel's awfully well regarded. A little bit of backstory around the issue of time. So the reason Nigel and I met, and it's all about working in not-for-profit space, does take a long time when you're from outside it. So the reason we connected, Nigel hasn't heard this story, but I founded an organisation called the Brisbane Junior Chamber of Commerce in 1983 when I was about 23, and I ran it for 10 years. And there was pre-internet, so we had to market with flyers and post. I had a secretary, and once a week it was post day. So that's how long ago it was. We grew to 400 members, which is outstanding, over 10 years, and we had a big committee, and I had a lot of young up-and-coming business leaders in our 20s at the time working with us. About 10 years later, maybe 15 years later, one of our new executives was a young fellow called Jason Titman, and Jason was a young accountant working at the Norris Motor Group, I think at the time. Jason was on a committee. He met his wife Tanya, who was another member of the group, and they're still together, one of my best friends. And we get together every couple of years as a past executive to keep in touch. About 5 or 6 years ago, I got a call from Jason, or an email saying, Jason, I'd like you to meet the chairman of the CEO of one of the not-for-profits that I sit on, being the Mater. And I initially said no, because I had no idea about not-for-profits. I'm Catholic, so I was just used to giving the money away, and that was it. But I acquiesced, and I thought, oh, fair enough. I eventually said I would agree to meet Nigel, but I had no idea who Nigel was. And I met Nigel with a fellow called Mark Alleman, who was one of his senior fundraising people at the time. And Mark and I actually connected just this week on another matter, so the circles keep turning. And Nigel just explained to me the challenges of philanthropy back then, as an outsider with a professional network, and maybe I might have some ideas outside the box. And this was Mater, which has a pretty big engine when it comes to fundraising, and that was about 6 years ago. And from there, we just tagged around ideas and concepts. I learned to take the answer no very well. Before that, I don't take no at all. So in my world, saying no is not something I normally accept, because I'm from private enterprise. So it's normally yes or no qualified, but not normally no, go away. But in the world of not-for-profits, you get told no a bit. So I got used to it, and Nigel's trained me well. So so winding forward now, and I come up with some ideas at the time which are a little bit left of centre that weren't really suitable for Mater. And as of today, I've just come up with another good idea which I'm going to share with Nigel after lunch. So I'll see how quick I get to know out of Nigel. But he's always very supportive of my ideas. But today I work in a charity called Aspiration for Kids in Sport. When I say work, I don't mean paid work. I mean put time into it. And we run a project called Ian Healy Captains Club, which is a business networking group with sporting people. And we run about 6 events a year and raise about $200,000. And myself and Ian's secretary run the whole thing. And in that organisation, which is run by 2 part-time administrators, I would put up 20 ideas a year and probably get told no 18 times. And I just wear it because I understand their world, which is they're busy doing the basics and they don't have a lot of time for new ideas and implementation. So unless I do it, it ain't going to happen. So I've been learning about engaging with the NFPs, A, thanks to getting into it at the high end with Nigel, and then B, more recently with a very small charity where the same fundamentals still exist. They're driven by their immediate priorities. Everything else is secondary to that purpose. And so Nigel's connection with me really started back in '83, meeting Jason, who today is the CEO of a company called Nito, which is a payment gateway business part owned by Telstra, very successful young IT business. I'm still young, he's younger. And that's how we've connected. So the world of NFPs takes a long time. These relationships, take a long time. A, to get me to meet Nigel in the first place, and B, then to follow up and continue to engage. So NFPs are a long-term game. If you're going to get with them and help them, think long-term. If you're looking to work with them professionally, again, think long-term, and use the hub as a reference point to leverage off, which is what I do today. But there's certainly a lot more giving than taking in this world of the not-for-profits. As long as you've got that approach, you'll do well. Because there's lots of good people like Nigel in the system that are always looking for support, assistance and ideas. It just takes time to develop and implement. Nigel, I'm going to pass off to now to talk about his experiences in philanthropy over 20 years, probably the current challenges and where he sees, I guess, the industry of philanthropy and fundraising going, from his perspective at the Mater and I guess the industry in general. Thanks, Nigel.
All right. A couple of observations. First of all, often known when it comes from the non-profit sector is what I'll call collective voice. That is, it's a representation of a number of people, lots of different ideas. And one of the issues I found in non-profits over many years is that the diversity and complexity of stakeholders is quite different than in other environments, for-profit environment. I used to use the analogy that no one really got particularly upset about what Woolworths might do. I might change that analogy off the back of this week. Companies. That may not be quite so apt, but nonetheless, it is often a case of working within and working with different ideas and opportunities, herding cats. One thing as a fundraising professional, I'm also used to no. No can mean no, not now, not this, not that, and you've actually got to rise above that. One thing also you reminded me as you talked about LinkedIn profiles. My daughter is in HR. She's a couple of buildings over in Hayes, and she's been saying, "Dad, your LinkedIn profile is rubbish. You really need to get that sorted." She's right, so I'll get onto that, Matt, because
only looking around the job.
Well, it also tells a story, and I guess one of the things that I should reference is very, very quickly in prefacing the comments I want to make today is yes, I have been at Mater 20, actually coming up within a matter of a few weeks, 24 years, and in the sector for close to 36. So I've had the wonderful opportunity of observing the non-profit sector writ large for the best part of 4 decades, but particularly through a lens of fundraising practice, which in many respects I've grown up with vocationally as well. Both me and the practice are pretty much at the same time. So whilst I've had, I guess, the view from working inside organisations 4 in total in that time, I've also had the opportunity of, in fact, chairing Fundraising Institute a couple of times over the last 21 years. I've served on other international bodies, including national practice, so in fundraising. I'm currently on a very interesting group, a UK-based group, which is a charity, but doing research into philanthropy and fundraising. So I represent that a bit as well. I'm also on the board of Community Council for Australia, which gives me sort of another perspective from a broader sector context. And I'm on the board of another charity for kids, actually. So when I'm talking about things, I'm not talking about it from a Mater lens. I'm really taking a sector lens and lots of reference and stuff that impacts the organisation I run. But it's not just about that. The other observation I make is this: it's been my experience over years for people with less involvement in the non-profit sector to assume a level of homogeneity around the sector, that all things are the same. I say with 600,000 to 700,000 non-profit organisations in the Australian marketplace, that's anything but true. And when you're talking about 5% of GDP being produced out of the sector, which is bigger than Tasmania, you're really talking about a large, diverse, complex organism which is made of many, many parts, which actually has no natural connecting point as well. So it's quite a diverse type. And one of the things I hear over time and have heard over many, many years is this idea that, well, if you're in fundraising, there's only so much money to go around. That charity pie, it's only so big. Okay? I don't believe that for a moment. Not because I don't want to believe it, because my experience has been something different. And really the data that we see coming out of the marketplace from a sector point of view continues to evidence that. Yep, I'll touch on some fluctuations around that data, but generally that's so. If you scratch back to what's actually going on in terms of people engaging in giving, and you understand the human factors that are at play here, and even some research I was exposed to a month or so ago on this UK-based group that I'm involved with, really talks strongly to this idea of donors' self-identity and the way in which they feel and their values in terms of giving. It talks to a different sort of elasticity in place in market. And I think the other comment I'll make here is that this idea of giving being commoditised in a way that's tangible. You know, I might buy one car or another, a Mazda or a Volkswagen, but I'll generally just buy one. But in giving, we have a far more expansive brief if we are moved to do so. So I actually liken this charity pie concept much more to magic pudding, Norman Lindsay's magic pudding. If anyone remembers the story of the magic pudding, every time you cut a slice, it grew back. So for me, that analogy works far better. That said, it's not always the case, and in recent giving data, we have seen some real challenge around this idea of elasticity playing out. What's market data over the past 2 and 3 years is telling us, in fact, is more people, the number of people that are giving are less. The giving is increasing still marginally, but maybe not proportionally in terms of market growth. But there is a retraction around the number of people participating, and that seems to be true in Australia and the US from the market research I'm seeing. So again, that sort of contradicts a bit of what I was talking about in this human condition, but I think there's more at play here. And I think there's another question I'll sort of throw into this mix that we come back to, and this is this idea of, you know, are we giving less or are we asking more? And there's a challenge there. So let's have a look at some of the data that's been floating around the sector for a while. When I first started talking about these things a couple of years ago, at that stage, 2 years ago, the ACNC, the Australian Charities and Non-Profits Commission, were talking about there being 55,500 registered charities. Okay, so I talked 600, 700 before, that's non-profit organisations. You scale that back to registered charities, which sit inside that less than 10%. Today, it's about 57,500 and growing, at about 7 every working day. Yep, 7 every working day. It reminds me of a bit of thinking about that number. Well, joke with Bono at a concert I was at YouTube a few weeks ago, and there was clapping. Every time I clap, some child dies in Africa. Someone yells out, "Stop clapping, you bastard!" Anyway.